Well, tensions remain high between the United States and Iran after weeks of aggressive attacks. Joining me live now is senior policy researcher from Corp, Heather Williams. Heather, thanks for your time this afternoon. Earlier this week, Iran made a number of arrests after the downing of a Ukrainian passenger jet that killed 176 people. Iranians have been protesting over the incident. Do you think that the arrests will ease locals' concerns at all?
I'm not sure. I don't think that the population will necessarily see those as the individuals that are appropriately being held accountable, or perhaps just scapegoats. I also think that the protests that we're seeing are not simply about the downing of that jet, but also of that reopening a wound that we see of just the public frustration. Just a reminder that in December we saw some of the largest protests we've seen recently over gasoline prices. So there's a lot of angst amongst the Iranian population right now.
The killing of Soleimani, the military leader there, how significant is that? How high was his profile, and what a monumental, I guess, person was he in Iran?
Yeah, so it's extremely significant, I would say, for the Iranian government, for the military, and how it operates. Soleimani was a very capable military leader who'd been in his position for decades. So there's definitely a loss there in terms of their ability to operate in the region and some of their established relationships. I also think the fact that he was seen by the Iranian public as a military hero is not just manufactured propaganda by the regime. Over the last decade, they have started to make his profile more public and more prominent, particularly in his involvement in Iraq and Syria. So he had become a fairly well-known national figure, and so I do think that there is a sense of injustice throughout the population of what happened.
But he he had a pretty awful reputation. Why was Donald Trump so committed to killing him?
Yeah, so I think he had by that reputation, I presume you mean outside of Iran. So Soleimani was the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Force, Quds forces for 30 years. And that is the part of the Iranian military that's responsible for conducting terrorist operations and for working with terrorist and militia groups like Hezbollah and like the Shia militia groups in Iraq. So he was, well known amongst Western governments broadly as one of the leading individuals pushing Iran's support to terrorism.
And Heather, there have been multiple missile strikes at Iraqi bases housing US troops, which has resulted in multiple injuries. What do you think the next move will be? Are we likely to see more aggressive behaviour from both the US and Iran? Overnight, Donald Trump even tweeting about, the situation in Iran and Iran attacking the US. So it doesn't seem like it's really starting to mellow out at all.
I mean, I would say that this is certainly not over. It seemed like things had quieted down immediately after that Iranian military response on U.S. bases because they hadn't caused direct casualties, though obviously there's new reporting about the concussions that did occur for some service members who were there present on the base, which is the new reporting of those casualties that did occur. But even separate from that, I think that those strikes by the Iranian government were a symbolic response, but they plan to do something more in response to Soleimani's death to kind of restore this sense of justice that they may have. Maybe that there's just too much going on in both countries for this to cause something to happen tomorrow. But I think in the coming months, we'll continue to see this crisis escalate.
Where do we go from here if we are heading in that direction? How will the conflict be resolved?
Well, I don't think that resolution is coming anytime soon. I think hopefully we continue to be in a stage, or we can be in more of a stage where there is a management of the conflict on both sides. The greater risk is that one side will do something that continues to escalate the conflict, but I don't think that either side is kind of looking for off-ramps or mechanisms to reduce tensions over the long run.
There was a
So
lot of
maybe we're between a better and a worse and a much worse scenario.
there was a lot of talk at this very beginning of the new year when this was really starting to escalate quickly after Soleimani was killed. A lot of people were saying that this is going to be the next World War III. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that is catastrophising the situation, or do you think that this could be something that really does get grossly out of hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, a conflict between the U.S. and Iran would be a conflict between the U.S. and Iran, and unfortunately, probably also Israel. But I can't see that that conflict would escalate necessarily beyond those states. So, in that sense, I don't mentally go to a place where there's a World War III like scenario. But I do think that there is a potential for more direct kinetic action between U.S. and Iranian forces, and I think that would be a very dangerous and bloody circumstance if it were to come to pass.
How real is the threat of nuclear weapons in this particular situation?
I mean, Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, and I don't presume that the United States would use a nuclear weapon against Iran. So that's not, I think, a real and present threat. What I do think could happen is that this conflict could drive Iran to put more energy or reinvigorate its efforts to develop nuclear weapons.
Will be interesting to see exactly how that pans out over the coming weeks, and hopefully it does de-escalate, but as you say, that is unlikely. Thanks for your time this afternoon, Heather.
Thank you.